Since human beings have become aware of our own consciousness, we have been fascinated with trying to figure out where it came from and how it interacts with our physical body. While we still don't have a good answer to this mind body dualism, what if we did have some insights into how it actually works? Hey, y'all, I'm Reese, and welcome to Making Meaning. Making Meaning is a podcast by the Cohere Collective here to help guide you along your path to make meaning in a way that makes sense for you. This week, I am sitting down with embodiment and nervous system coach Kathy Taylor. The bridging of the gap between science and spirituality in Kathy's work is absolutely fascinating to me. The more that we learn about embodiment in the way that our physical body seems to take up an ethereal space as well, we've just been kind of diving into this world and what actually is material and what's immaterial and how can we make that work for our self-growth. And that intersection is right where Kathy's work lies. Kathy was actually one of my advisors in college for my sorority when I was on the executive board, and she was just such a formative part of me stepping into my own as a leader, and learning from her and the way she works with other people was really, really powerful for me. So this was a beautiful full circle moment to be able to talk to her more about how she approaches this work. In today's episode, there is also a demonstration of some of Kathy's work, and if you are listening on audio, you won't be able to see my actual physical body doing the movements that Kathy is directing me to do. So if you want to see a little bit more of what that looks like, of course you can head on over to YouTube to see the video version, but I'll also be posting on Instagram the documents that kind of explain the visual embodiment work that we'll be doing, so you can also head over to the Cohere Collective on Instagram to check that out. Okay, I believe that's all I have for the intro, so as always, let's take a deep breath and get started. Kathy, thank you so very much for joining me today. I am really, really excited to be chatting with you and just hear more about the updates to everything you're doing. For our listeners, they will have gotten a little bit of a bio on you at the beginning before they dive into our conversation. But Kathy and I actually met. She was an advisor for me in my sorority work in my undergrad in college, and was just an instrumental part of my growth through that experience. And this feels like a very full circle moment for me. So I'm really excited for being here and really grateful for your time.
Well, thank you. I was really thrilled and excited that you asked me, so I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start with the same question I always start with, which is just what is something you're grateful for right now?
Well, right now I can look outside and I see my horses out my window, and I'm always grateful for them because they teach me amazing lessons. And it's just, it's a, I'm very grateful to be able to have the amount of land that we have and the property that we have to just go out into nature, hang out with the horses, do something with the horses, connect with them, have a real relationship with them. It's just a lot of fun, and I just get so much out of it.
Yeah. What do you think is different about your relationship to horses specifically, as opposed to your relationship with humans or other animals?
Mm. Well, unlike like a lot of times people will say a horse is like a big dog, and actually no. A dog is a predator, a horse is a prey animal. So that's a huge, just in the way that their brain works, that right there is a huge difference. And so they
Yeah.
have relationships in different ways. We are similar to horses and dogs in that all of those species are um, herd pack animals. They're or community focused animals. And but just the way that we think is a little bit different. And so with a horse versus a human, actually the horse, a traumatized human is a lot like a regular horse brain. as far as how it works. Meaning when a traumatized human or a human that's been through a lot of trauma, our frontal cortex, our thinking brain shuts down, and they just don't have as much of one as we do. They have much more of a survival brain than we do. And so the way we can relate to them is different. So the way that my horses help me and help my clients is that when we can sort of ground in ourselves and realize what we're feeling, we can take that to the horse, and the horse responds in a way that a human might, but a human might cover that up. Like a human might say, "Oh, I'm not afraid," and just stand there. Well, a horse, if they are not afraid, or if they are afraid, they will respond some way. They might not run, but they might just say, I'm just going to wander over here to some other grass. They might
Right.
actually come into your space. And there are some humans that come into your space when they're afraid, right? It's
Yeah.
so their fight, flight, and freeze responses are much more obvious than ours. So we can practice our responses with them and then relate those
Mm.
responses to humans. So
There's not the same masking almost is what I'm hearing.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't to
That is
say
so
that they don't
fascinating.
hide their emotions too, because um, they mm, when they're, for example, if they're injured, they're not going to say, "Oh, look at me limping. I'm the one that you need to tow for, mountain lion," right? They're going to try to hide that. Um, and we do that more, I would think, on an emotional level. So I feel like I'm getting off in the weeds here.
No, no, it's super fascinating, and I'm sure we'll dive more into that as we get a little bit deeper into your actual nitty-gritty of the work you do with your clients. But of course, kind of second main big question to really open up our conversation is what is your story? Of course, big question, whatever you feel called to share in this moment is perfect.
Mm, what's my story? Oh, I have a lot of years. That's Let's see. I mean, I grew up middle class in Jacksonville, Florida. Went to private schools all my life. Um, and went to college. I've always been into horses. Um, Married a guy in the military, and we traveled the world for a couple of decades in different countries. We spent 6 years overseas in both England and Germany, and that was a lot of fun. Have a couple of kids who are way older than I think they should be, and but I'd say throughout that whole time, I grew up really as a I would call myself a people pleaser and a perfectionist, a recovering now, and someone who always felt like they had to prove their worth to not only to other people but to myself. And so the horses have been really
Mm.
helpful in backing that off, helping me realize that perfection gets in the way of connection every single time. And my newest horse Sadie is really teaching me that trying to get the approval and appease others is not the way to do it, because when I go out there with that sort of energy, she's like, "Where are you? And would you just show the heck up?"
Mm, wow.
Yeah. So I sort of come by the horses naturally since I've been doing them for 50 years or more. And then more recently, I started in with the embodiment work that I do. And that started in 2020 when I took a course and then ended up following this other guy on social media, or actually not social media. Someone told me about him, and I did a webinar of his. And when he said, "Okay, let's go back into ourself and put your focus on yourself." Okay, that felt fine. And then come back to neutral and then go forward again and put your focus and your attention totally on someone else. And all of a sudden I could feel that I had left myself behind. It was I mean, I could
Mm.
feel that in my body, which I've never really been an in your body person until the last several years. Because I always thought I was in my body, but I thought I was in my body. Instead of feeling, I was in my body. I was great at thinking my feelings, not so great at actually feeling them.
Yeah.
So that's been an evolution, and that has come through that embodiment work, and then also through the nervous system work that I do, which is much more objective and probably, I would say a little bit more biomechanical, but it really is um, objective as far as, you do you do an assessment, you do a drill, and you reassess, and you know right in the moment if that worked for you or not. And so that came about because I got bucked off my horse really badly in 2019, and to the point where, yeah, I could get on a horse. It's not like I couldn't ride again, but my confidence was shot. And I thought, if I do get on a horse and the horse even just like stumbles, like doesn't fall, it's not like they're walking along and they just stumble for some reason, I know my whole body's gonna go "Ugh," because I was in such pain on a quick jerky motion like that. So it took me about 2.5, 3 years to find applied neurology, which is what I've ended up doing. And after 4 weeks, I had my first pain-free day definitely in the past 3 years since I'd gotten bucked off. But even before that, I
Wow.
had chronic back pain. And so, and then 4 months later, I had no pain whatsoever anytime. And I still have no pain whatsoever anytime because I continue to do my drills, which take, like 5 minutes a day, literally. Um, and they're super easy and they don't take a bunch of, extra equipment or anything like that. So,
Right.
yeah.
It I felt myself almost wanting to say it's so miraculous, but then I'm like, and it feels so, but it's also deeply rooted in science. And
Mhm.
one thing with your work in particular, and reading more about it, and of course, knowing you, that I really love is that it does bring this intersection of like hard and fast science, things that we know are true. And like you said, with the neurology that you work on, it's like we can do this assessment, do the drills, and immediately have some results. And it's very measurable, it's very
Mhm.
quantifiable. But there is something intangible about this work too that does make it feel miraculous. I almost borderline spiritual. How do you feel about this kind of combination between, I know you call it like the body and science, but is there something, I guess I'll say the hard and fast versus the soft. What does that balance look like to you in this work?
Gosh, let's see. I've always, I call it the practical woo because like I love all those crazy things that you're like, oh my gosh, how could this happen? This is so wild and weird and bizarre. And then finding out like how it works and what it works, it's like, oh, well, okay. So to me, it doesn't, and knowing the reason why does not take the mystery out of it. It actually makes the mysterious more interesting to me. And I
Hmm.
really do like that combination of the practical and the woo. And I've had more than one client when I'm doing, especially the neuro work, say, this is voodoo in the moment. And one the other day called it scientific voodoo. And I was like, that's a great, that's a perfect
That's great.
definition. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
That's
because
so
she
funny.
she she goes, you've got to tell me how this works. So I explained to her, it's about the nociceptors and this and that other thing, and she's like, okay. And she's a scientist, so she understood that, and she really appreciates the science. But she also,
Right.
it's we don't. How often do we actually tap into our brain as instead of just something to think with, something to help our body move better? Because all of those things are in there.
Right. Well, in almost using the knowledge of what we have about the brain now and that it is connected to every part intimately of our body and using that knowledge as a tool to be able to help ourselves as opposed to having the knowledge and kind of saying okay like this is something that we know how it works but it's what's the next step with it in terms of the practical woo. I love it. Where do you feel like the idea of a mind connecting with the brain kind of takes shape in this work? Do you feel like there is something that you see in your clients that is selfhood kind of evolving as they learn this tool of the brain, or is it more of a returning to their roots and their core of learning the brain? I don't know if I framed that in the right way. Does it feel like they're taking ownership and control of something or returning to something more or something else?
Mm. Probably, I would say most of the time returning, but I don't know
Mm,
that, but that's my um, perspective. They might
sure.
think, because I feel like so many of my clients, and because I was there too, right? We're so in our head about everything. We're like, let's think about this, let's problem solve. Let's take the pieces apart and figure out what it is so we can fix the one part so the whole thing can get fixed. And so that's a very biomechanical, sort of left brain, masculine, if you will, sort of way to um, go towards things. And so if we can say, okay, that there's nothing wrong with that. That's very valuable. And there's this other part over here that's valuable that you can actually get to it that way. And I think a lot of times people would like to start with this neuro because it's comfortable. They're like, kind of like me. I don't want to feel my feelings. I just want this to go away. And it's like, okay, but you actually have to feel your feelings. Like that's actually a good thing. And maybe the reason that you're afraid to feel your feelings is because your brain is in threat and it's like, no, this feels too horrible. So if we can calm down the brain, we can calm down the system, then it actually makes it easier for the person, for the client, whoever it is, to go, okay, now my whole system is a little bit settled down. I'm able now to feel those feelings just a teeny tiny bit. And now maybe just a little bit more, and then take a break, and just a little bit more and take a break. So it's this, it's we're really taking baby steps, and so it's about practice. And so whether it's a return or something new, I don't know. I kind of think, is there anything new under the sun? No. But are they aware that they are returning? Probably not until later on, but I don't really know that for sure. That's just my guess.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense and at least speaks to your experience with this too, right? That not only is this something that you learn and actively teach and are an expert of, but it's something that has really worked for you. And I'm curious what you think was the first element that really sparked your interest in doing this kind of work. I know you said, of course, you'd always been interested in the horses, but why get into I hesitate to use the term coaching because it's such an oversaturated word, but into help service work. What called you to that specifically?
Mm. Um, I think it was, so when I got into the work that I do with the horses, the equine assisted learning, um, I got there because I went to a demonstration. And I mean, this is in 2008, I think. So it was a long time ago. So I went to this demonstration. So I've been riding since I was 5, been in horses since I was 5. And, several people invited me to this thing and tried to explain to me what it was. And I was like, I still don't understand what the heck you're saying. I have no idea, but it involves horses, so I'll go. And, that seems to be a common thing. Like, I don't know what it is, but I'll try it. That seems to be a way that I get to places that I'm supposed to be. So I definitely
It's
got,
a beautiful attitude to have. I love it.
thanks. Yeah, so I definitely got to the equine assisted learning that way, because so the story that I've got is, at this demo there was a facilitator, and he had a call him a client or whatever, in the arena, the little round pen with the horse, and he asked if he could get the horse to stand still for 1 minute in one place. And the horse was moving around, the guy kept putting him back, and it was frustrating for both of them and that sort of thing. And so, but at one point, somehow there was a feed bucket that appeared at the side of the round pen, and the horse said, "Oh, yay, there's breakfast." So he went over to the and started eating. And so the guy's like, huh. So he pushed him back to where put him back to where he was. And the horse like stood there for about maybe a microsecond, and then like, I'm walking back over to the bucket. Thank you very much. And this happened a few times. And finally, the guy's like, okay, forget it. He just picks the bucket up and he puts it outside of the round pen. So the horse, took away the option. And, and so there were a couple things that I got out of that. One was how different your perspective is when you're in the arena doing it versus when you're outside, because all of us outside were like, why did he do that? Like, that was the answer to his problem, right?
Right.
Like, put the
He'll be
bucket anywhere.
standing by the bucket for a
Yes.
minute. Yeah,
Put
yeah.
the bucket anywhere or whatever. And yeah. And so later on, when the facilitator asked, so how many times in your life are you so focused on the problem that you don't see the solution when it's right there in front of you? I was like, oh my gosh, like knocked me over with a feather.
Right.
So there was that lesson. There was the lesson about the perspective, and there was also the lesson about where are times in our lives that we put restrictions and rules on ourselves that aren't there, because the guy had never
Mm.
said you can't, the horse had to stay in the same place that you started for 60 seconds. It just said any place for 60 seconds. He didn't say you couldn't use food to do it. All these things. So he had put so many restrictions and constraints on himself to keep him from it. And then when he did see the solution was just really right there in front of him and he just didn't see it.
Hello, everyone. It's Reese interrupting this conversation super quickly, just to remind you that the best way to support the Cohere Collective is by subscribing wherever you are listening to this podcast. If you are enjoying it, please give this video or episode a like, leave us a 5-star review and a rating talking about your experience listening so far. And if you're curious about more of what the Cohere Collective has to offer, please head on over to www.thecoherecollective.com. Okay, back to this conversation. It's so, I think this idea of how often do we put restrictions on ourselves that aren't there is so true. And it's something I was thinking about the other day with just all of the, like, this rule book that I kind
Mm-hmm.
of constantly have going as a partial internal monologue throughout the day of, oh, well, but you can't do that. Oh, but you can't do that. Oh, but you can't do that. And I was just thinking about how many times in a day I tell myself I can't do something,
Mm-hmm.
even if it is just, oh, don't blow your nose in front of your class or something, right? But it's like, it's still oh no, that's against the rules.
Mm-hmm.
But that rule is still something that has been made up. What restrictions do you find you most help people start to break down and break away? And how does that ripple out into other areas of their life? Because I would imagine, like you said, it's a practice that I imagine as people start to practice this kind of system of breaking down some of these restrictions, that it starts impacting other things more broadly, right?
Yeah. Well, so I think so much of those constraints we put on ourselves are things um, that we have pulled onto us or have been put onto us so that we belong.
Mm,
Right. And belonging it's a human need. We literally must belong when we are an infant or we will die.
yeah.
And so to me, it kind of goes back to all those needs that we have and were they met? Were they not met? How were they met? And so we have this, and Gabor Mate says this, if you're familiar with him. He's
Mm-mm.
I think he's Hungarian doctor, psychologist, something. He's got a lot of books on trauma. And he talks a lot about um, this tension between authenticity and belonging. So how can we be our true self and belong? And how often we choose to belong instead of being our authentic self, because that's what we need to survive.
Right.
And so the work that I do with myself, with my clients, is trying to find out what is that balance of uncovering, recovering, discovering your true self and for yourself, and how can you also belong? And what I find is that the more you can do that, it seems counterintuitive, but because I think that's as we grow up, right? As we grow up and get older, that's that whole process of individuation. Is the more I can be myself, the more I actually belong, and not just to myself, but the more I feel like I belong within my society, my family, my whatever. And I love what Brene Brown says too. She talks about how um what is it, the most the most compassionate people are also the most boundaried. You
Mm,
know, and when we are boundaried in ourselves, when we know who we are, where we start and where we end, then it's easier to know where someone else begins and someone else ends.
right.
So we don't go in trying to fix them and control them.
Yeah, absolutely. The another Brene Brownism popped into my head as you were talking too, that was the difference between belonging and fitting in,
Hmm.
right? That it's like there's often this idea of like true belonging is when we're in our authenticity and still a part of the in group, but fitting in serves the same purpose as belonging for that baseline safety and security, right? And if the belonging, because authenticity is vulnerable, it feels like more of a risk to be able to go there, do that, let ourselves open up. Um, have you ever found, well, because I tend to agree with you that the more we are authentic, the more we do belong. I do think that people really you automatically magnetize yourself to people that are going to be your people, and you allow other people to be their authentic selves too when you are. um what is the thing that has helped people, I mean, it's sitting right behind you, be full of themselves. I love that this is your technique. I think it's such a genius phrase for from all of the perspectives, both the psychology, philosophy, marketing. It's just a brilliant phrase. um But how what's the first step of being full of yourself? And I suppose before we even get it there, how would you define being full of yourself?
Yeah, I love this. I think we hear or we associate be full of yourself with stop being so full of yourself because somebody was like, stop being so full of yourself when you were a little kid. And I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I thought, well, hang on a second. Who else am I supposed to be full of if I'm not full of myself? Like, I don't want to be full of you or my mom or my sister or whoever. I need to be full of me because otherwise I'm not me. I'm not being my authentic
Yeah.
self. And to me, to also to be full of it is to be, I don't know, taking up sort of from this internal posture perspective, taking up all that space in you, like not having other people's thoughts running through your head. And I'm not saying that I've got this mastered by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure, sure, sure,
But
sure.
it's certainly, but it's a practice, right? So not having other people's thoughts running through my head and not doing things just because the way that someone else did, just because they said they did or they said I should, maybe not. I mean, I feel like in business, the longer I've been in business, the more I think all these blueprints for business, like everybody's got a different blueprint. Why, my nervous system is going to be different from your nervous system. So to say that this is the seven steps to success is just a bunch of baloney. It's your 7 steps to success, and that is great. I'm thrilled for you. And my number 2 might be the same as your number 4 or whatever, or similar, but I'm going to do it in a different way. And I feel like so much of in our effort to belong, we think let's do it this way because it worked for them, and if it worked for them then I'll belong. And actually, going back to that, if we can have the courage to do it, maybe follow that generally, but do it put our tweak on it, then we actually have success in the way that we want to have success and the way that we feel successful.
Mm. Wow, yeah, and then it really does become success defined by your own version of it.
Mhm.
Because I think you hear a lot like, and I reached the top of the mountain and it was kind of like, then what? What has all this been for? Like I'm living my wildest dreams, but I'm not happy like I thought I would be. And I think largely it's because, well, you are chasing the dream of success that is sold to us, not the dream of success that is your success. And so when you do it on your terms, it inherently is your definition of that, which I think is so, so powerful and allows everyone equal opportunity to to success based on their own definition. Um, what would you say to someone that is like, okay, I love this. I want to start being full of myself. How can we start thinking about this to try and change that narrative in our head of becoming more our own voice than external voices and being full of ourselves as opposed to rules, restrictions, other people, or any other number of things?
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is just, and of course, this is my first step.
Right, right.
But I do think in general, you need to know where you're starting from, right? So like
Mm,
what are the places where do you notice, oh, I played small there, or I felt my body shrink back, right? Even that, I mean, it might not be a conscious thought, but you can you notice your body just going, whew, just back, just this littlest bit. And it might not even be your whole body moves, but maybe you just kind of feel sort of this, your spirit inside you just kind of get a little smaller, like, oh, I shouldn't say that. Or does it also just be like, well, blah, 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 and get really, really big? Because that's also not really taking up your space. That's taking up yours and then some. And that part's not yours
mm,
to take up. So to me, the embodiment work that I do is very, um, what's the word? It's a very sensing um,
mm,
thing, very sensory. And so it's like we literally will move our body backwards and forwards, down and up, narrow and wide in space. Like, how much space should I take up right now? And so this may be a silly or a silly equation or whatever analogy, but like if you're on a crowded bus and there's more, or and there's more and more people getting on, you're going to take up less space because you're trying to make more room for more people, right? But as more people get off, you can take up more space again. So right there, everybody, you're not necessarily trying to be in connection with anybody or anything like that. Um, and that, sorry, this is really going to go off the rails here, but
no,
because what
no
I
such thing. I want to hear it.
what came back into my body when I was feeling that was when I was in Italy after college. I was on a crowded bus. And so I was getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And there was this guy who was like right in front of me, like, on the bus, how you kind of like turn back to back, or like you're not going to be facing each other because that's very confrontational. No, this guy was like his head was like right here, which means his body was like right in front of me. And he is starting to push on me. And I was like, no. And but I'm thinking, is he doing it because the bus is crowded and we're getting jostled and all that? Still not cool, but at least understandable. And the next time he did it, I'm like, no, that was totally intentional. And I had my fist and I had my little finger out like this, even just a little bit further, how you just do the little noogie thing. And it was like right at the level of his navel. And I was like, if he does that one more time and he comes one more millimeter closer, he is going to get a punch in the gut. And fortunately, he got off at the next stop and he didn't do it anymore. But like, so in that instance, I was making myself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And finally, at some point, I was like, no, like this is my
Mm,
space. And so part of me wonders, did he actually, not consciously, but did he feel me like straighten up and go, this is my space? And so then he didn't do that anymore. And I mean, I'll never know. But these are the things that go through your body. I mean, and that was how many, 40 years ago, 30 years ago? I can't remember when I even was in college now, but um, that's what the thing about the body remembers. And so the body remembers when you were 2 years old or 2 days old. You don't consciously remember it. You don't have thoughts of that, but it's in your body. And so noticing when you go, oh, I need to get smaller, or I got to get really big, or I don't really know where to be, and I'm sort of all over the place. Noticing in your body when you feel like that, and then seeing, well, what was going on then? What was I feeling then? What was I experiencing? Then you can sort of start mapping out, was I being too passive? Was I being too aggressive? How can I find that assertive place? Because it's always in the middle. And that changes from time to time, or I mean, all the time, depending on who you're with, what the situation is. It's going to change on what your energy level is. Did you have enough? Did you have good breakfast that morning? Did you have good sleep the night before?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that is unbelievably powerful. And I've been thinking a lot about, not even recently, over the last few years, about how connection really is about space.
Mhm.
And there's so many different definitions of space. But even in listening to you talk right now about how, um, we make ourselves smaller and bigger, and the language of like feeling these things, right? All of this is both physical and energetic, because we know how we can like physically make our bodies smaller and physically make our bodies bigger. But also, I think in your example as well, it was also the energetic, like, oh, I'm trying to not take up space. I don't want to bump into anyone. But then the energetic, okay, I'm going to stand my ground. And it's the both and of that. Um, how would you describe this kind of both and of being full of yourself? And I guess I'm also curious about this connection to almost like the body's memory. Do you think there is this might sound like a silly way to phrase it, but a place in the body where that is stored? Because I know with a lot of somatic nervous system work, there is like a like people will say they get in a pigeon pose and then all of a sudden they start crying, right? Like there's this big emotional release when something in the physical body is stretched and released, and maybe that place has been tight. Is there an energetic memory to the body as well? How do you kind of conceptualize of that?
Um, I'm not, I would not say I was trained or knowledgeable in like, oh, my shoulder means this or my liver means that. Um, I look at it more from maybe from more of a big picture, sort of a global kind of lens. Um, so like one thing I'm thinking of is when you're trying to combine how did you say it? The sensing and the physical and the body. How did you say it?
uh it's physical and energetic,
Yes,
maybe?
that's
Is
what
that
it
what I
was.
said?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So so our body um our body automatically does what it does energetically, right? Like, and what I mean by that is it's hard to say, oh, I'm reading this really good book, and you're like big and wide and forward, right? Like you don't read books like that. You read a book, you're sitting back in a chair, so you're pretty narrow and back and down. You might be wide. You might be, maybe you got your leg, your legs are spread out, you're crossing your legs and your book's out like this. And you see the 5-year-old kid going down the soccer field to score their first goal, and you're not going, oh boy, I really hope they score that goal. No, you're the opposite. You're up and forward and wide, like go, 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 encouraging, right? So in the embodiment work that I do, we've got these quadrants. And so that first one is, I call it inner experience. The second one is collaboration, and they're opposite of each other. There's also a connection one and a self-agency quadrant. And so you can kind of go around those. So one of our poses, for example, is called gateway. And gateway is, it's like you're holding your arms out, your legs are wide. So it's a wide pose. It's active. And in this point, it's also back. So my focus is on myself, and I'm taking up space. And what's the other one? And I'm yeah. So I'm taking up some. So it's action and it's wide, right? So I'm and back wide and back wide and up. That's the other one. Thinking, what's the other dimension? And so in this is sort of this pose, and you can do it if you want to. Just try it. Just
Yeah, I'm
like what does that feel like to you if you get in that pose?
I mean, it feels very open and almost, it's interesting because I was expecting it to feel aggressive isn't the right word, but more dominating, and it actually feels quite vulnerable to
Mhm.
be
Mhm.
so open, right? And I have a wall here, so I'm not quite as open as I could be, but to be super broad, and maybe it's the back as well that
Mhm.
feels vulnerable. Um, Even though you're tall, it does kind of feel like a breeze could push you over, right? Because you're not super,
Mm. Okay.
you're not in your 3-point stance.
Okay. So try that again. We'll just play with you for a sec if that's okay.
Absolutely, I love it.
And I don't know if people see this. Are people? Is this a video as well when you release it?
It is. It's
Okay.
also a video.
Okay. So
Mhm.
I don't know how much they'll see, but anyway. So we've
I
got
can
our
post photos on social media as well for audio only listeners, so
okay.
we'll make sure people see.
Okay. So and you're seated, right? But you've got your feet on the ground and your arms are out, like kind of like you look like a tree. And so, but you said it still felt vulnerable. So one reason it feels vulnerable is because you are open, right? Like this is, you might be looking out, but if you bring the attention to like the space between your shoulder blades and then down to your sacrum and then down to your feet, and how does that change anything?
It does feel more grounded. It feels I feel rooted. That's the word I'm
Okay,
looking for.
great, great. That's
Yeah,
just what I was
a
hoping.
little bit more rooted.
Yeah. So now feeling a little more rooted, if you think about, so feeling this way, so this is a space of self-acceptance, self-appreciation, that I can accept myself for everything great that I do and everything horrible that I do. Everything that,
Mm.
my limitations as well as my successes. So if you think now in this feeling this way, and if your arms get tired, just let them down for a second, right? Because it is tiring. But think about there are times where maybe it seems like you found that a balanced, we call that a balanced gateway, right? Where you feel like, yeah, I can do this. But think about something that maybe you're like, I don't know if I can do that. Like something that you're like, I don't know, am
Mm.
I going to go? What's something that you would sort of never think you would be able to do?
Oh, goodness. This is so funny that this is the first thing that occurred to me, and maybe it's actually really indicative of my personality because I'm like in career and like posting things, I'm like public speaking or anything like that. I'm like, we'd make it happen. But like asking someone out is something that has
Mm,
always been really difficult for me to like make the first move, which may seem a little superficial, but it's like it was the first thing that came up,
okay.
so I'll go with it.
Okay. So feel into your body, like feel that situation. And first of all, what I would like you to do is because my assumption is that you're focusing on the other person, right? Like even though it's
Mm,
you asking them out, you're like, am I going to get rejected or not? Are they going to say
right.
yes or no? So bring that attention back to you, and then just try to go into that gateway pose, but only bring your arms up or as wide as they really want to be that feels really like you?
Yeah, it does not feel as strong.
Mhm.
It feels a little wilted.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So if when you're feeling like this, if you're trying to go, "Oh, I've got this," your body and your brain, they know the difference.
Yeah.
Right? It's not actually authentic. And so that's when we kind of take up too much space. So if you can just sit there for a minute in this, like, yeah, it doesn't really feel all that great to think about that. And then, like, what's the resource that you need? Do you need to feel more grounded first? Do you need to get narrower first? And just move your body in that way. Just kind of think about your seat and your feet for a sec and see how does that change where your arms are kind of willing to be able to go. And don't try to force it. Just listen. And if they only go up a little bit and they want to go back down again, that's okay too. So what's happening?
It is getting stronger, but I moved back actually a little bit
Hmm.
in my torso,
Okay.
which makes me recall what you said almost at the very beginning of our conversation about the training that you got where you were told to like step fully into yourself and then back to neutral and then into someone else and you left yourself behind.
Hmm.
The move backwards feels like it's not this false or not well, maybe false kind of confidence
Yeah.
of like broad shoulders, but this kind of um I suppose grounded, um maybe a bit more not protected, but it feels strong from like a home base
Hmm.
feeling.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So your body, even though I said go down, it went back. So you listen to your body.
Mhm.
Awesome. So you went down and back a little bit. So I'm curious now if you bring your arms a little bit narrower, like bring your elbows a little closer to your body and just to see. And then kind of root back down again since that and go back and just feel that. Feel your sacrum, feel that space between your shoulder blades. Take a breath. What?
That's so funny. It feels very out of balance in that my back feels very vulnerable. Um, but I feel my gut instinct was this is very protective. And it's like, oh, I'm very much protecting self. But I was like, as I'm doing that, it's like it is exposing that kind of like spinal column more
Mhm.
than here that feels like it kind of nestles it in
Okay.
a little bit. This kind of lets my back be exposed, but
Okay. So the narrow, it sounds
yeah,
like, does not feel good to your system.
mm-mm.
Okay. Cool. All right.
No.
So
That's so
instead of
funny.
bringing your, sorry, so you were bringing your elbows together like this. If you just, well, let's see. Don't worry about that. So, so now kind of give your body a little shake for a second, just to kind of shake it all off. And now if you think about that scenario of asking someone out and just allow your body to go into sort of whatever kind of gateway-esque pose it wants to go in and just feel what does it want to go in now? And how does that feel different from before?
It is almost a balance of not moving back too much because there is still something about the like forward active stance that feels powerful, and this almost feels like too protected
Mhm.
to be open. It's like there it does take a certain amount of openness to connect. Um But I've also noticed, I don't know if you can see, my hands
Mhm.
throughout that process, they were very much like blades.
Mhm.
And that last one, I was like, oh, my hands
Mm.
feel much softer.
Mm.
So even though my shoulders and chest felt like it took a strong position, my hands softened and my feet stayed rooted and grounded. I think also the connection between the shoulder blades, sacrum, and then feet, that up to downward movement really helps with that feeling of grounding as well.
Mhm.
For me, that visual is super helpful.
Yeah, cool. Cool. Yeah, so that's what I do when I play with people's bodies. Just moving back and
Thank
forth.
you.
And everyone's different. Sometimes it's a practice from like we're getting really small to really big to really small to really
Right.
big because that's what they need their body because maybe they're sort of stuck in the middle. It's like so can you do the two extremes? Other times it's I can do the two extremes but finding that middle place is really hard. So
Mm.
sometimes you go fast, sometimes you go super slow. Sometimes it's just a micro movement, sometimes it's a big one. And everybody's system is different. So it's always interesting and fun, but it's just very enlightening. It's like, oh, this is what my body actually does.
Well, and to actually, it's a different type of intelligence that you're
Mhm.
tapping into that we're not used to tapping into, right? Like, even in that moment of like, just let your body do what it wants to do. Don't try and force it. It's like, yeah, I am trying to force something that
Yeah.
it's like, is this the right answer? Is this what Kathy is looking for? And it's like, of course that's antithetical to the entire experience and process, but it's the practice is also in the noticing of that, right? And in the noticing of those pieces that want to come out to play. And it's like, okay, no, just let
Mhm.
let be in it. That's Thank you for that. I deeply appreciate it, and I think our listeners will find that really, really fascinating as well. Um, so when you talk about these neural exercises you do with your clients, is this indicative of a lot of what that work looks like? Is this a main exercise you use? Are other exercises similar? Um, yeah, tell me a bit more about the nitty-gritty.
Yeah. So this specific stuff that we just did was I would call the embodiment work. And so we call it
Okay.
embodied intelligence. So you talked about it's a different kind of intelligence. It's the embodied intelligence. And I think of it as embodied as something that I don't have to think about. It just is. Like I want to have embodied
Mm,
confidence. I don't want to have to go, "Oh, I need to be confident now." I just want to be confident, right?
right.
Um and so that's sort of one way to do it, one way to approach it. The other way, the more neuro way is really much more um it's not really cognitive, it's just really objective. So, for example, this may or may not work on you because I don't know your system at all, but we'll do something like so for example, just if you just sort of test your range of motion right now of your neck, like how far can you turn to the left and how far can you turn to the right? And just notice sort of where your eyes land. So that's going to be and if there's any stiffnesses or anything like that, you don't want to go to make any pain, but you're just sort of noticing that. And then just do something really simple. Like I said, I don't know if this will work on you or not, but this is
Sure.
this is a cranial nerve drill. And so just if you do a tongue circle, so you're just going to take your tongue and just go around your mouth like this. And just do that 3 times in each direction.
And for listeners, this is drawing a circle with your tongue around the outside of the inside of your lips, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
between your teeth and your lips, keeping your lips
Mhm.
closed. Yeah. Kinda like if you're trying to get something out of your teeth and you wanna not look very, obnoxious.
Okay.
Okay, and so now just test your range of motion in your neck again. I know I mean, my range of motion isn't any better necessarily, but the tension in my neck is, like, gone.
Yeah,
This is usually when
that's
people say voodoo.
wild. Yeah, that's really that that is really, really wild. Wow. Because I completely agree. I don't know if my range of motion actually got better, but it was like a few stiff points where it's like that is just not stiff
Yeah.
anymore. Can I ask what does the tongue movement do? What part of the nervous system is it? My terminology is not going to be correct, so please correct me, but what part of the nervous system is that lighting up to create a new pathway, healing a pathway?
Well, so this is where it's gonna get really sciencey sounding probably. But, so that's a cranial nerve, right? You have a cranial nerve that's in charge of your tongue movements, and if it doesn't
Mm,
get the, input that it needs, so you're giving your by moving it, you're giving that nerve some more input, and so then it says to the brain, "Hey, here's what's happening in this nerve." And the brain gets more information from that nerve, and then it can go, "Okay, now I know where things are a little bit better. My whole system can go calm down just a tiny bit. It reduces threat, and therefore you reduce your pain in your neck or
mm,
in your back or whatever it happens to be that you're working on.
wow.
Yeah.
No, that's really, really brilliant, and like you said, very grounded in science, but it's the practical woo. As we move into the last little moments of our interview here, um, I want to ask why this work is so meaningful to you. And I know we touched on a little bit about how discovering this work and starting with your relationship to the horses and feeling the way that this has really helped you in your own growth and your own healing has been, a big piece of your journey. Why are you so motivated to continue helping people with this? And what does that meaning look like?
Mm. Well, first of all, because it works. And I think that's one thing with the neuro stuff is people can see that it works like right away. And so you get a
Yeah.
quick win and people are like, "Oh yeah, like I feel better." And I can see that I feel better. It's not just in my head that I think
Mm,
I'm actually feeling better. And then, it's all the same nervous system, whether we're working on it from this sort of sensing, feeling gateway kind of thing that we did before, or we're doing a literal drill. It's all the same nervous system. And I, from a really big picture perspective, I truly believe that embodiment is the way to world peace.
wow, yeah.
Because when we are in our body, we are connected to ourselves. And the only when we're connected to ourselves can we really be connected to someone else in a meaningful way. It's when we're in our bodies and we're connected to others that it makes it really hard to call someone else a name or to you might misunderstand someone, but because you're going to have rupture and repair in relationships, but it makes it easier to repair that relationship when you're assuming some positive intent from them because you see them also as a human being.
Right.
And so, so that's my big picture. Not that I ever think I'm going to be like it's not like my mission to achieve world peace, but if I can help us each take up all that space that we've been given, like every single bit of it, no more and no less, then, we all can then put pressure on each other's in a pressure in a way that connects us. Right. And what I mean by
Mm,
that is, um, there was an exercise that we did at a workshop that I attended that was just it was so just mind-blowing. And it was, there was there were two of us and we faced each other, we put our hands towards each other and touched, right? And so the first instruction was how much pressure do you need to feel like you're connected to this human? So our palms are facing each other, touching each other. How much pressure do they need to put on you? How much do you need to put on them for you to both feel connected? So it was really this balance of, well, so I happen to be working with someone who has one particular attachment style, and I'm another particular attachment style. So I put my hands up there and she put her hands up there, and it was almost like her hands were sort of tickling mine, like I need more pressure to feel connected. I need
Right.
like more surface area. So I pushed a little harder, like seeking that connection. And she thought I was, in her body thought, oh, it's being pushy. I need to draw back. And so before I knew it,
Mm,
her hands are kind of at her ears, and my elbows are straight, almost, pushing on her. And I'm still thinking, I need more connection. I need you to push back. Her body didn't feel safe to push back. And so it was this, dance of, how much can you feel safe? How much can I feel safe? How do we feel safe enough together to have this
wow.
relationship?
That is so beautiful. And like, quick, do some tongue circles and then try again, right?
Well, yeah. And so, yes, that's exactly what we can do, is do some drills right then to bring the threat level down. Try it again. Okay. How is it now?
Wow.
We just
Well,
give
and
the
I
body
think,
more options that it hadn't. It's like if you think you have the choice of six things and suddenly none of them work, and you go, oh, well, how about 60? The body's like, oh, okay, let's try this. Let's try that.
yes. Wow, that is really so beautiful. Second to last question. In light of our conversation and everything we've chatted about and experienced together, is there anything we missed that you want to make sure you throw out there? Is there anything that you want to say, anything you want to add? Um, Anything at all? This is time for you to speak in case I didn't get to anything that you feel is worthwhile.
um, yeah, here's something. I think, especially in our culture where we all want everything to be better, often we all want it to be better now or yesterday. And the whole idea of, if I can just fix this, then I'll be okay, and I'll fix this and I'll be okay, and I'll fix that and then I'll be okay. It's it's kind of like trying really hard to fall asleep when you can't fall asleep. It just makes things harder. And so, from that embodiment perspective, it's like, sort of forward and up and narrow, like I'm always doing these things. And if I can literally like scum down and sense and make a little space and have some space and really have in my mind and in my body that I'm doing this and things are happening, even though I might not be consciously aware, trust that things are happening, and trust that you are where you are supposed to be, that you're not, that wherever you're going to get, you will get there eventually, and that will be where you're supposed to be. And every step along the way is also where you're supposed to be, even if it's not very comfortable.
A reminder we all definitely need to hear and embody. Um, to close out our conversation, what is one word to describe how you are feeling right now, how you are sensing right now? I'll change my language to be yours.
Mm. I am energized right now. I'm very energized from this
Mm.
conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. I cannot thank you enough for your generosity of time, energy, and your lovely expertise. This has been so fulfilling, and I am so excited to share it with people.
Thank you very much, Reese.
Thank you all so very much for watching today, and a big thank you to Kathy for her time, energy, and expertise during this episode. If you are interested in working with Kathy, all of her information will be linked in the episode description wherever you are watching or listening. Like I mentioned in the intro, Kathy, of course, does work with equine therapy, but she is also primarily an embodiment and nervous system coach and does this beautiful somatic work. So I highly recommend heading over to her website and checking out all that she has to offer. If you are curious about working with me, you can head on over to www.thecoherecollective.com. I work one-on-one with people to help them find and pursue their purpose. That's a really big topic, so if you're curious about more, please come check it out. Please follow the Cohere Collective here, wherever you're listening, across social media, all at the Cohere Collective. This is the best way to stay up to date on announcements, new episodes, other content, everything that we're doing. A big thank you to Nicole Oesterreicher for making Meaning's art and podcast cover. You can find Nicole on Instagram at Nicole O Creates or Nicole O Designs. And a big thank you to Tristan Morgan for making Meaning's theme music. You can find him on Instagram at Tristan Morgan. Right now, I am feeling open. You may have noticed if my windows are open, so I'm a little backlit. Not the best lighting in the world, but that's okay. And you may get a little bit more background noise than normal because my windows are open. But this past 2 months, I just feel like my self-growth has been on fast forward. And I feel like I'm really hitting just this breakthrough moment of coming into my own and my power and the person that I really want to be. At least in this iteration of this moment of my life, because of course that will continue evolving. But I have just been feeling really grateful for, one, all this growth and change, but also all of the windows in my apartment that can open. It feels like I just live on this beautiful little terrace that overlooks the Tuscan countryside, which I guess is exactly what is real. And that's wild. And being able to have these windows open and the sun shining in as I'm experiencing this growth and trying to maintain this openness of mind and spirit as I'm going through these changes and these evolutions, it just feels like a really beautiful, physical representation of the energy that I'm feeling too. And yeah, I'm just feeling open. I'm feeling ready for the growth to continue and for whatever happens next, finding joy in the all of it. Again, thank you all so very much for joining me today. And as always, I hope you feel like you are living more coherently. Until next time, love.